The Utah Jazz entered the lottery with hopes of maybe even landing a first or second overall pick, as they were one of the three worst teams in the NBA last season. However, they fell to the fifth pick, which was far from an ideal situation for them, but they still landed a prospect worth being excited about in Rutgers wing Ace Bailey. Ace entered the season as many's number 2 prospect in the class, and even someone who might compete with Cooper Flagg for the top spot. However, while he had a good year at Rutgers, he did have his ups and downs. It was clear Dylan Harper was the best prospect on that team, but I also believe that Ace Bailey showed a lot of potential during his 1 year with the Scarlet Knights, and while he had a weird draft process that led him to slide slightly further than what was initially expected, I do think he is somebody worth being excited about if you're Utah Jazz fans. I want to talk about Ace Bailey, his fit with the Jazz, and his long-term potential as a player. But quickly, before we go any further, if you're new and like basketball, I'd really appreciate if you would like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and notify whenever I release a video. I make videos about basketball, and if you enjoy basketball, I really think you're going to enjoy my content, and doing all those things are the best way to let YouTube, but more importantly myself, know that you enjoy the content so I can make more of it in the future. But let's talk about Ace Bailey. And I actually want to start by talking about the draft process with Ace. I'll be the first to admit, I made my jokes when he went 5th overall on Twitter, but I think in all seriousness, it's not all on Ace Bailey. I don't think it's fair to put everything that happened that led to him going 5th overall instead of maybe 3rd overall squarely on him. You have to remember he's only 18 years old. He's barely an adult. He doesn't turn 19 until August. He's going to be one of the youngest players in the NBA in his rookie season. And for the older audience, basically anyone my age or up, which I get isn't old, but I'm 23 turning 24. Basically anyone my age or older, you graduated from college, you likely are in a job where you're using your degree to be employed and make a living. So think about this. What were you like when you just finished your freshman year of college? You just wrapped up finals, you're ready for the summer. What were you like then compared to what you are now? And for maybe a younger audience, think about like if you're a senior in high school compared to your freshman year of high school, or freshman year of high school compared to where you were in middle school. My point is, you grow up eventually, and I think Ace will grow up as he gets older. I will admit he could have handled the process better. I think it's better to be open to all potential options, and that's not just a draft thing, that's something that applies to life in general. But I also think it needs to be known, for the most part, he was probably only following the advice that the grown adults in his camp were giving him. And I'm not saying people need to be blamed for what happened, but if you're going to point to somebody about a situation like this, I think it's a lot more responsible to point and ask questions about the adults in the situation. I get Ace is legally an adult, but the grown adults that are around him and influencing him more than it is to this point at, Ace, who is, again, only 18 years old, and put this all on him. I don't think that what happened during the draft process is an indictment of Ace Bailey's character. I don't think it would be fair to say that it is something that defines him as a person. None of us know Ace Bailey as a person. For the most part, I'm pretty sure anyone watching this video doesn't have the insight that we do into Ace Bailey's life, and likely never will. So it's not fair for any of us to judge his character based on a process and decisions being made that he wasn't really fully in control of. But I did want to get that out of the way. This video won't be an indictment of Ace Bailey's character. This is mostly going to be about what he is as a basketball player, and I guess we should get into that. And starting with his strengths, he does have a pretty ideal frame, around 6'9" shoes, 203 pounds, 7'1" wingspan. I think that really is like build a wing in a lab. That's what it looks like physically. He still does need to add more strength to his frame. We'll talk about that later. But I think the starting point of his frame is pretty good. Now, I don't know how much he can grow physically while maintaining his athleticism. I'm not a doctor. But I think in terms of his height and his wingspan, there are a lot of positive signs with his frame when it comes to the fact that he's likely going to be a 3, maybe if he bulks up a bit and gets to a weight where he can add strength but also maintain his movement skills. Maybe he can play some small ball forward. But I think the frame is fine. He is somebody that has plus athleticism. I wouldn't say he is a freak athlete. He's not the Thompson twins. He's not somebody like a Cam Whitmore. Basically any wing from that 2023 draft. He's not that level of athlete, but he is a plus athlete. He has very good vertical explosion. He can jump out of the gym. But I do think that he will have the athleticism to thrive in the NBA. He has a real ability to hit tough shots as well. It is a double-edged sword, and we'll talk about that later, but I think there is a positive spin on the fact that he has this natural feel and natural comfortability taking and making tough shots over defense. And mainly though, what I'm most excited about with his offense is his potential off the ball. I think he's somebody that can run the floor in transition. I think he can run around screens. I think he's somebody that could be a cutter, attack closeouts. He has the athleticism in the frame to do things like that at a high level. And anything on the ball you get is a good leverage and adds to his skill set more than being the main focus. That's been my main gripe with him. I think he gets pushed in these conversations to be this heavy on-ball player. But I think where he's going to thrive the most is off the ball and maybe do some stuff on the ball if you need him to. But outside of the scoring, he's actually a pretty good rebounder. I don't think he got enough credit for that. He averaged 7.2 rebounds per game this season at Rutgers. I like his activity on the boards. I think it's an area of his game that can get better as he gets stronger. And also, he's not perfect on defense, but there are a lot of positive signs. I think there are good movement skills. I think he has a great motor. I don't question that. When you look at players who fit this profile of tough shot making, score first, wing guard types, the defense is usually a question. I don't have that question with Ace Bailey, which is why I think I'm higher on him than other guys of his archetype, where I did kind of have those questions, like a G.G. Jackson, like a Cam Whitmore. But I think that he's more than a scorer. It's just not in the way you would think. He's a good rebounder. He's somebody I think has real upside defensively. But the flaws in his game are evident as well, especially on offense. Doesn't have a good handle. He does lose the basketball, can be a bit lackadaisical, it's loose. He's somebody that I think struggles to create space on the ball, which is why he does rely on tough shots. This is the other side of his tough shot making ability. He's kind of forced into taking those tough shots because he's not great at creating separation, and that's what separates, pun intended, the good creators or the capable creators from the elite creators. The ability to create space is how guys like Jason Tatum, SGA, Luka, among others, they make their money. They can hit those tough shots, and they definitely do at a high level. but they also have a real ability to create the space for easier looks for themselves. Ace really doesn't do that, and well, I think there are some athletic signs that maybe he could grow into one if the handle improves. It's not impossible to improve your handle. We saw it with Jaylen Brown throughout the years, but it is a real question, and it's also not a guarantee that it happens. Either the rim pressure and play strength are a bit of a concern for me as well. He doesn't really attack the rim well. He doesn't handle physicality well. Again, maybe he does add some strength and he does get better in that area. But these are things that I believe as a scorer will hold him back from ever being like your primary scoring option. And also the playmaking is kind of non-existent. He made a few reads here or there, but there really wasn't anything I looked at and said that could be a plus playmaker in the NBA. Assists per game numbers aren't everything. I think the context of him playing on a pretty bad Rutgers team where he was clearly the second best player and had to be the best player when Harper was out, it did lead to him forcing up more shots because that really was the only source of offense that they would have in those games. But even when Harper was there, it's not like Ace really showed many playmaking intangibles. He does have shot selection concerns. I will say that's something I think he can grow out of over time. I do have questions about how much he'll be enabled in Utah. Maybe it'll lead to bad habits, but I've seen guys grow out of the shot selection thing a lot. And I think if Ace becomes what I think he can become, it won't matter in the long term because he won't be forced into this super high usage role to begin with. And there are some defensive awareness concerns, but again, that's something that can grow with time and reps. He's a good athlete, he has a high motor, he has a competitive nature about him, and he's not the first 18-year-old to have questions about defensive awareness. That can grow with time and reps. But overall, I do like Ace Bailey as a prospect. I'm not as high on him as some were, but he is someone with a lot of potential to be a really good player in the league. And we'll talk about that toward the end of the video when I talk about his projections. But I do want to talk about his fit with the Jazz first. In all honesty, they needed to take best player available. Now, for me personally, Ace Bailey was in BPA. He was 10th on my board. However, 4 through 10, so basically everyone for me after Flagg, Harper, VJ, they were pretty interchangeable. And I think where those guys ended up going, some of them fell further than where I had them on my board. But the ones that did go in the top 10 from 4 through 10 on my board, it was just about what the team needed. And me personally, I would have taken a Trey Johnson because he has the scoring upside on top of more playmaking potential. Or I would have gone with a Derek Queen because I think he had the most upside of anyone after the top 3 in this class. But I don't think it's a bad thing that the Jazz took Ace Bailey. I definitely see where they are coming from in believing him to be the highest upside option on the board and also best player available. So I think it was a good pick for them to make. If they believe in him, I think that's what's most important. I think a player that gets drafted into a situation because the owner wants it and basically everyone else doesn't want it, that's not good for the player. That's not fair to the player. We've seen examples of that in the past of how that doesn't work out. But based off the Jazz's draft history, I do think this was a fully flushed out plan more than it was, hey, someone at the top wanted this pick and now we're stuck with it. I don't think it's that situation. Regardless of who they picked though, it was going to be a bit of a clunky fit because the Jazz really don't have a direction. They have some young players I like. I really like Keontae George. Isaiah Collier didn't have a great rookie year, but he showed potential in my opinion. And really, outside of Collier, anyone they took was going to be similar to a young player they had on the roster. I think you look at what the wing situation is in Utah, and Bryce Sensabaugh is somebody I think might be a small ball forward. Cody Williams, I don't think he was close to good enough to basically say, we're not going to take Ace Bailey. We have Cody Williams. So I do think that Ace will get a decent amount of reps to grow and develop. There is always the downside of him maybe developing bad habits, but I like the situation for him. He's going to get shots up, and I think he has a motor to his game that makes me at least confident in the idea of him improving from his flaws, but only time will tell with that. Now, what does the best case scenario for Ace look like? I think he's a high-level secondary option that fits next to a lead creator. I think players like Lauri Markkanen, Rashard Lewis, or what Trey Murphy's developing into right now, taller floor spacers that can maybe create on the ball in spurts, but you prefer them playing off ball because they can do a lot of damage in that regard. Somebody that can be like a 20-point per game scorer on a contender, but isn't your main option. I think that's what Ace's best outcome looks like. I don't see the Kevin Durant comps. I don't see the Tracy McGrady comps because there are playmaking limitations. And those playmaking limitations are also why I don't really see like a Brandon Miller in him either. Miller had some similar questions in terms of the space creation and the rim pressure, but Miller is a significantly better playmaker, so I can't get quite there with Ace. But again, if you're Lauri Markkanen, Rashard Lewis, and Trey Murphy in terms of role and player caliber, that's a really good player and definitely worth a 5th overall pick. Maybe even a pick higher than that. But I think, median outcome though, somebody that is a similar mold to Jabari Smith Jr., that was a comp that was thrown around throughout the cycle. I will say I think Ace is a much more functional athlete than Jabari was coming out of college. I think he has a better handle than Jabari did as well. Not that either of them have great handles, but I do think Ace has more like on-ball juice, even if it's still limited. But somebody that can be like your 4th or 5th starter, put up like 12 to 15 points per game. That's what Jabari is right now, and the story isn't over for Jabari. That book hasn't closed. He can still get better. He's still super young. But what it looks like Jabari is going to be long term based off what we've seen so far, that would be like the median outcome for Ace. Again, 12-point per game scorer, maybe 15-point per game scorer in the right situation, 4th or 5th starter. And on the low end, I think he's an exciting middle to back end rotation guy. Somebody that can be a spark plug, has some exciting moments, but at the end of the day, the limitations are gonna hold them back, and it'll keep them on the fringe of the rotations. Think of like Cam Reddish, in LA, somewhat New York, definitely not New York, but Atlanta as well, where you saw some exciting flashes, but you don't know if he's ever gonna quite put it together. I think that's like the worst case scenario for Ace. But I'm obviously, with all these guys that I'm talking about, and we'll continue to talk about in the future, I am hoping for the best case scenario, and also for him to maybe exceed the best case scenario. That would mean that we have more great players in the league. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about Ace Bailey in the comment section below.